Welcome to Blind Abilities. I'm Jeff Thompson. Today in the studio, we have Christine Malec. She's returning to talk to us about the Luminato Festival. And this is a festival that has audio description on steroids. And you may know Christine from the podcast Talk Description to Me with JJ Hunt. Christine, glad to have you back on Blind Abilities.
Hello, thank you. So great to be back with you.
Well, it's so great to hear your voice again. And what is this? Is this the fifth Luminato Festival that we've covered?
You're putting me on the spot. No, it might be the fifth that you and I have covered together because I've been involved with it for a few years. So the Luminato Festival is a Toronto-based arts and culture festival. And the reason that it's worthwhile to talk about on Blind Abilities is because once again, there is a podcast component, and the podcast component is blind and low vision led. And so it's an audio only experience of the festival, but it's also some amazing standalone podcasty content that centers the blind and low vision experience. And so listeners who are not blind or low vision but want an audio only experience, they're going to get some pretty innovative stuff that involves a lot of audio described content about the festival. But what you also get are artist interviews and some creatively presented stuff that sort of center the blind and low vision experience. And so I'm able to say to an artist, okay, so I've never seen that particular thing. Can you describe it? And what this leads to is a lot of conversations in which an artist or a producer will say, wow, I've never been asked that before. And so the guests love it too, and it leads to some amazing interviews. And so I'll give a bit of a background on the festival. It runs this year, it's June 4th through June 22nd, and it's weekends, mostly weekends only. And it happens at a lot of different venues around the city. And so the shows range from plays, theatrical productions, concerts, listening parties, art installations, like large scale art installations, live music outdoors, walking tours, discussions. There's a really wide range of things that happen around the city. And the city is kind of the focus in a certain sense, because the idea is kind of to bring art to where people are. And one lovely example of this is on June 5th, I am going to be at Union Station, which is a transit hub right downtown where local subways, commuter trains, trains to the airport, and via trains, which are cross-country trains. This is a transit hub for all of these modes of transportation. And what's going to happen, it's called Dawn Chorus, and it is 5 wires who will be performing at different places around Union Station starting at 7 a.m. Now, I'm a morning hater. I'm very open about that. But I'm going to be trekking down there, microphone in hand. Myself and 2 of my co-hosts will be recording. One of the co-hosts is an audio describer, so she'll be doing some people watching for us. She'll be describing the space, describing the singers. And guaranteed within the first 15 seconds of the singing, all my endorphin glands will just be squirting like crazy. And I'll be super happy because to me, music in public spaces is one of my passions. And music in acoustic spaces like an open transit station, it's what I love. So 5 different choirs around 5 different locations, and there will be a podcast episode about this. So this is the great part, is that you don't have to be in Toronto to experience this amazing stuff. So one of our upcoming episodes will be about Dawn Chorus, which is all of these singing people in a place where you don't expect to find a choir. It's, 7:30 in the morning, you're grumpily sort of swishing your way through your commute, and oh my gosh, there's a choir transforming the space into a concert hall. And I'm pretty stoked, even though I have to get up at 6 in the morning. I'm pretty stoked about this. And so other iterations of art sort of finding people instead of people having to look for art. There are two large scale, well, several, but two that I've worked on. One's called Rainbow Dreams and the other's called Tercera Decks. And these are large scale art installations that are being placed at specific locations in the downtown core. So you're walking through your commute, you're on your way to work. If you're a sighted person, all of a sudden, bang, there's this big rainbow art installation right in your face, inviting you to walk in or to stand and stare or to sit down and contemplate. And Tercera Decks, I'm really looking forward to this one. Jeff, have you heard of Luminarium?
I believe you mentioned this on a previous Luminato Festival episode, but why don't you give us a refresher?
Okay, so Luminaria is the plural. These are inflatable structures, and I haven't been in it yet, so I'm going based on the interview that I had. I was so lucky. I get to do the best things for my work. I interviewed the founder of Luminarium. So these are installations that they sort of turn up as a big flat pack. And what happens is they get inflated, and what you end up with is a structure that you walk into. And it's been described as a combination of a womb and a cathedral. And I spent some time in the interview is up on the podcast page with Alan Parkinson, who's the founder. Lovely guy. And when I asked him about that, like, what do you mean a womb and a cathedral? What is that about? So the space is very self-contained. It's this sort of non-off-gassing plastic stuff that you're walking inside, and there's sort of like tunnels. And I guess the acoustics are sort of close and intimate-ish, and there's a playful sense to it, but they're also made out of, they have this kind of translucent visual vibe where it's a little bit like stained glass. And so the visual effect is very cathedral-ish. And you sort of enter into the main part. You take your shoes off. It's one of those shoes off experiences, and you wander through. And when I had the interview with Alan, this was lovely. I sent him my questions beforehand and I said, can you please describe this experience in a non-visual way? And when it was the day of the interview, he said, I hope you don't mind, but I sat down and I wrote out a bunch of notes. Like, he really spent quality time with my questions and thought it through. And he had this beautiful sensory description that did not center vision. So in the interview, he has this great description of what it's like to be in a luminarium. And also what he had to say was that coincidentally, recently, he's UK based, he's in Nottingham in England, and they had a group of blind and low vision kids through recently. And the kids just went wild because I guess there's no right angles in there. And this is something I hadn't really thought about, but the structure, because it's inflated, it's kind of, there's spheres and there's tubes and there's tunnels. And when there's no right angles, if you're blind or low vision, moving becomes a bit different and somehow freer. And he was describing watching these little blind and low vision kids just tearing around and bouncing off the walls in this installation. And it was absolutely lovely. So this is being assembled in Toronto, and it's called Tercera Decks because it's the 30th anniversary of Luminarium. And I know that these luminaria have been in different places in the United States because I've heard other people refer to being inside them. So when you read about them, they're kind of described as visual, like of course, they're sort of site-centered descriptions of it. But Friday, June 6th, I'm going through with JJ Hunt and Ramya Amuthan, who are co-hosts. And so Ramya Amuthan is a host and producer on AMI and Blind and Low Vision. And JJ Hunt is an audio describer. So we're going to walk through Tercera Decks, and we'll be recording, and so that also will appear as a podcast episode. So I should say the festival is called Luminato, Luminato, and the podcast is called LuminoCity, but it's spelled LuminoCity to focus on the city vibe. So it's city centered. kind of experience in real time. So there'll be links in the show notes too, I'm pretty sure. But if you're looking for it on your favorite podcast app, it's spelled with a C, LuminoCity. It might also come up as Radio Lumi because that was our podcast name in former years. But this year we did a marketing, did a little rebranding, and now it's LuminoCity. So the podcast the hosting team is myself and Ramya Amuthan, who are both members of the blind low vision community, and then JJ Hunt and Rebecca Singh, who are audio describers. So each episode is related to one of the Luminato pieces and explores it in a more in-depth way and from a blind-centered kind of take. And so the performances also, there's a huge handful of performances that have audio description. And so these range from dance pieces to plays. And one of the really great innovations this year is described walks. And so this is something that audio describer JJ Hunt has been doing in Toronto for a few years. And what this looks like is JJ will pick an area of the city that has either historical significance or architectural significance or, some quality that makes it an interesting neighborhood. He'll do research and he'll take members of the blind and low vision community on a guided tour that is very similar to the kind of walking tour you might do if you were a tourist, but he's included all of this descriptive language. And so he will be describing the historical context of, say, a building, and then he'll do a really thorough visual description. And these walks are super popular. He's done the Distillery District, he's done the Christmas Market, he's done an annex tour, a harborfront tour. So these are very popular in the community. And the Luminato Access team kind of said, okay, what does the community want? What is the blind and low vision community like in terms of access? And, we said the walking tours, they're really popular. So there are a few tours that JJ will be doing that invite members of the blind and low vision community to come out, to walk around a space, to have it described, and to get some of JJ's great research as well. And one of them that's going to turn up as a LuminoCity podcast is something called Last Words, Talking in Cemeteries. And this one is, cemeteries are just really, they're interesting. They're provocative in the sense that they evoke a lot of emotion. And sometimes it's like, oh, this is a beautiful natural landscape. And sometimes it's, wow, these historical gravestones are really interesting. And sometimes it's genuine, profound grief because you're in a place that is about death and the living who grieve. So this walk is part of the Luminato Festival. It's a Luminato Festival event, and there are speakers who speak to different aspects of the cemetery that you're walking through, but then JJ will also be adding visual description. And so members of the blind and low vision community are invited to join and to sort of follow along with JJ through the walk and hear the speakers, the mainstream speakers of the festival, but then also JJ's visual descriptions of the things that are visible in a cemetery, which frankly are kind of mysterious to me. I mean, I've walked through them often enough, either just as walking because they're nice places to walk, or visiting for the avowed purpose of a cemetery. And so that's one of the walks that JJ is going to be doing. And that one, again, it will appear as a podcast on the LuminoCity page later in the month. So all of this content is stuff that we really want to bring to a wider audience, because even if you live in Toronto, you may not want to go out to an event, you may have limitations, whatever, but you can still have an audio experience of the festival.
I've listened to JJ. I think he did a Christmas one in Toronto one time, a walk to describe what was going on and stuff. And just very great. He does a great job. And this Luminato Festival, you said baked in, it's just like steroids of audio description. And for the founders to embrace that, to bring it to life for the blind and visually impaired is just something I haven't seen it done to this extent anywhere. So great job what you're all doing up there.
It's true, and I've heard other people in the field say the same, like, wow, I've never seen any arts festival or arts events step up in this way. Yeah, JJ and I, as some listeners will know, have done a lot of work together, like on the Talk Description podcast and other things. And one of the things I'm very interested in that JJ is doing this festival is now this one won't have, well, actually, that's true. We had I think it's episode 3, which is already up. I hosted a roundtable discussion on dance and audio description. Very complicated subject. And the roundtable included myself, Kim Kilpatrick, and Emily Cook, who are members of the blind community in Canada, and then cited storyteller Dan Yashinsky and cited ballet dancer and teacher Anne-Marie Cabri. And what this did was we talked about how dance could be described and conveyed to a blind and low vision audience. So this is happening already. There are definitely iterations of it, and there's room for experimentation, I would say. And so in our roundtable, we talked about this. What other approaches could there be? Instead of having a single audio describer doing what audio describers are intended to do, which is describe what you see, how could that be modified and possibly even turned into its own art form? Because with dance, when you just describe what you see, there's the risk of it being a bit mechanical or exercise class-ish. And dance is apparently, I'm still working my way through this as a blind person, but dance is way more than that. There's emotion, there's narrative, there's expression. And so this is something I've been doing other work with as well. How can dance be communicated? Is there space to make an art form out of describing dance? Could it be its own art form? So this year, there is a dance piece from Luminato called What the Day Owes to the Night. And it's a dance piece with a whole bunch of Algerian men who are apparently like jaw-droppingly gorgeous and sculpted, beautiful, beautiful men. There's not a lot of narrative. It's not like Swan Lake. There's not a huge story component. So JJ was tasked with describing this piece and deliberately experimenting. And now JJ, he'll say it himself, he doesn't have a ton of experience describing dance, which in a way is an asset because it's so interesting. I've spoken with him and Rebecca about this, and they both have a lot of trouble stepping out of their describer rules. Describe what you see. It's very challenging, I guess, to not just do that. So what JJ is going to do with this performance is something a little experimental. And I don't want to give away too much, but I was sort of involved in some of the collaborative discussions about it. And I think it's going to be very innovative. We talked about using different narrative voices, even if it's the same describer speaking, there can be sort of two voices going on. So one is the describer talking about how the bodies are moving, but then maybe there's another one that's engaging some of the themes or changing the perspective or just doing something innovative. And so I'm super curious about what JJ has come up with for this, because dance is, and I know I've talked about this, I think probably every year I've been on Blind Abilities talking about Luminato, because it's an ongoing pursuit for me. Can I appreciate dance? Is this a form that a blind person can enjoy? And to be honest, my internal jury is still out. I don't know. It's very complicated, but I love that the festival was willing to embrace something really experimental. And so the performance is on June 21st. So I'm really looking forward to that. But in the meantime, there's a really interesting roundtable discussion on the LuminoCity podcast. Yeah, it's up already, about a roundtable discussion of dance for a blind or low vision audience.
Yeah, during conversation, a person can kind of almost hear body language in a sense, the way they're talking, when they, sigh or like rolling the eyes and stuff like that. And then in dance, to have that motion and all that, like you said, the science of it, the physical movements kind of could get boring in a sense that it's a mechanical thing. And then, like you said, that emotion, the fluidity of all that moving and going at once. And how do you, without experimenting, I don't think I've ever seen someone blend the two. So that's great that you have two voices like that. That sounds exciting.
I'm quite curious. So, Dan Yashinsky and Anne-Marie Cabri, they happen to be friends of mine as well, and they're cited. They have totally different trajectories in their careers, but for some reason, they've both gotten extremely interested in this idea of describing dance. And so, one thing that they did just for fun, just to try it out, was they took 5 minutes of Swan Lake, a video, and they described it. And so Anne Marie, the dancer, was talking through the movements of the bodies. And then Dan, the storyteller, was voicing what the emotions were of the dancers, what the narrative was, like what parts of the story were being played out by the movements. And he would do something like, instead of saying, the dancer lifts her arms, he would say, you lift your arms and swoop across the stage. So he would change the narrative voice. He would make it second person, like you are. And when you do that, you engage the listener in a totally different way. And I think you engage a different part of the brain as well. And this is one of the things about dance is that you're watching it as a sighted person and there's an aesthetic and there's, oh, that's beautiful and wow, the skill. But then there's an emotional component too, which standard description, it's hard to capture that. So it's really interesting to me to have people who are not trained audio describers, but who say storyteller and dancer, sighted people, what do they bring? What do they bring to the table? So they were part of a collaborative team that JJ spoke with when talking about how to experiment. So yes, completely experimental piece. And I'm totally intrigued to see how it turns out. Another piece, there's a couple of things in this festival that I really was excited to work on. Along with Tercera Dex, one of the big art installation pieces is called Rainbow Dreams. And the creator of this is named Hiromi Tango, and she's a Japanese-Australian artist. And I interviewed her. So lovely. We're in love. We totally really enjoyed each other. And she's going to be in Toronto and we're going to meet and we might both just cry because she's just so adorable. But her motivation is to help a viewer to still their mind, to bring some peace and tranquility into a moment where they weren't expecting it. And because she's sighted, her mechanism to do this, as she says, is through the visual cortex. And we had a great conversation about how the other senses can do this, because the sighted centric world works through the visual cortex. And so she's working with visual images, and the rainbow is the image that works for her, that she really enjoys working with. So we had a conversation about the brain and how else can the brain achieve this level of calm? What other senses can be used? So the episode, The Rainbow Dreams, is coming out, I think, on June 3rd. And it's my conversation with Hiromi, but it's also a playful attempt that I made to make sonifications out of a rainbow. So a sonification is when you take data or a visualization and you turn it into sound. And my work on this in the past has been with astronomical images. I've been so lucky to work with Matt Russo and System Sounds, who take astronomical data and turn them into soundscapes. And what I did with the Rainbow Dreams was I used notes of a scale, like the C scale, the 7 notes of a C scale, to correspond with the 7 colors in a rainbow. And then I experimented with other sound effects that may correspond with the colors. So I got to do this super playful thing with something that for me is just an intellectual idea. Like, I've never seen a rainbow, and I can sort of understand sighted people experience awe and wonder and peace, and I can know about these things, but how can I experience them directly? So I got the chance to play around with that in my interview with Hiromi. And let's see, the other thing, there's a theme for this year's festival, which is the 24-hour city. And what this is alluding to is the things that go on. We all know about what goes on during the day when we're awake, but especially in a city, there's a whole nightlife. There's a whole group of people who work overnight, who maintain infrastructure, and there's always something going on in a city 24 hours a day. So Dawn Chorus, the installation that is 5 choirs singing at the transit hub downtown, Union Station. That's sort of the beginning of most people's days. The dawn, the beginning of the day, alluding to birds, dawn chorus. That's usually what you call the bird song in the morning. And then the sort of opposition to that, the opposite is called night shifts. And what this involves is art that is placed in subway stations around the city. And so these are photographs, large scale photographs, and there's 4 subway stations that are hosting these exhibits of several photographs, and they're not up yet, so we don't know what they'll be. But JJ and I are doing something really fun with this. There was a similar one last year. And what we did was we went to the different subway stations and we talked about the art. JJ described it as it appeared on the transit station wall and what people were reacting to it. And we did that during the day, like most normal people would. But this one, because it's night shifts, we're doing 2 different things that are different. We're going in the evening when it's dark out. And so art just looks different when it's artificially lit. And the people in a subway station are different at, 9:30 or 10 in the evening than they are at 10 in the morning. So we're going to do a similar thing to what we did last year, but we're adding an AI component. And what we're going to do is take a photo of the art on the wall, have AI describe it, as many of the blind and low vision community have become familiar with AI descriptions. Then JJ, the audio describer, will be sort of looking at that description and critiquing it. What did the AI get right? What did it get wrong? What did it miss? What did it catch that maybe JJ wouldn't have caught? And this is a subject that JJ and I are both really interested in. How is AI changing how the blind and low vision community are interacting with images, and how is it changing the delivery of audio description? This is a lively, hot topic, and if you're an audio describer, if you're not thinking about it, it's because you're avoiding it, because it's changing the landscape of audio description. So to me, this is another potential opportunity where audio description has the potential to shift from being a craft to being its own art, because AI is pretty darn good at describing images, but it can't give you the cultural context, and it's going to miss some subtleties, and it's going to miss the surroundings. And there's a lot of things that it just can't really capture. And so this night shifts, which again will also turn into a LuminoCity podcast, is about the art, but it's also going to be about the relationship between AI and audio description from a human describer. Jeff, are you using AI for image descriptions?
Well, I think I use it here and there because on my iPhone, it almost automatically gives it to you if you want to listen to it, or unless you swipe away from it. But yeah, I will use it. But I'm really interested in this AI versus JJ Smackdown. My
Right.
money's on JJ. You're right. It misses the subtleties, the cultural impact of a photograph. But if you can't see the photograph, all you're going by is what AI tells you. Then you draw your own picture in your head, and I'd like to see that picture compared to that picture, if it, at all possible. I mean, we're talking about thought bubbles, we're talking about body language. I think the Luminato Festival brings us all together, and where else can you get all of this? To be there live, like you get to be in person, and take all this in over a few days period would be awesome. But I'm so glad that LuminoCity has the podcast that you guys have picked and chosen to bring this to people around the world.
It's super juicy. It's super juicy. The content is, and like I said, I got to interview someone who invented his own musical instrument. I get paid to this? This is amazing. So this guy, his name's Justin Gray. He's a bassist, a jazz bassist, and he's also a very accomplished sound engineer. And he spent time living in India, and he invented an instrument called the bass Veena, Veena. The Veena is an Indian stringed instrument. So we have an episode where JJ describes some of these instruments, and I get to interview Justin Gray. And the live event is an album release party for Justin's album called Immersed. And there's like 38 musicians on this album, and there's a video component, and the event is taking place in a theater which has Dolby Atmos sound built in, and dozens of speakers are surrounding the space. And so you sit in the middle, and the theater normally has a capacity of 280 people, and he limited it to 140 because he wanted to make sure everyone had the idyllic sound experience. And so the live performance on June 7th will be in this TD Center, this is very sweet. If you know anything about Toronto, this would be meaningful. If you don't, it won't. But Massey Hall is a very renowned and storied music venue, big auditorium. But above it, there's these smaller spaces. And this theater with the built-in Dolby Atmos is above the auditorium. And I've never been in this space before. I've been to Massey Hall many times for shows, but this space is new to me. And in this space, we'll be surrounded by speakers, and this album will be played through the sound system in complete surround sound, designed and cultivated and refined by an expert sound engineer. So the live experience will be amazing. The podcast episode, like I said, JJ does some fantastic descriptions of Eastern instruments, Indian instruments, the bass vina, some instruments you won't have. If you're blind or low vision, even if you're sighted, you may have never seen them. You don't know what they look like. And then, I speak with Justin about his work. So, man, I love my work, Jeff. I got to interview the founder of Luminarium. I got to interview a guy who invented his own instrument, and I get to do it from the perspective of someone who's blind. So I just say, okay, I don't know what this looks like. Describe it. And they all step up. And I have to say, the content is super interesting. So no matter where you are in the world, if you have an interest in arts and culture, or even if you think you don't, this content is just great. And especially for blind or low vision people, you're going to learn about things that you didn't know about before.
There's so much here available to listeners. I don't know what sound effect I'd use for the endorphin glands squirting, but I don't. I get it now. You and your team are filling Toronto with the opportunities to experience audio description in an arts festival format that hasn't been done anywhere else. And this experiment, this trial and error that you're doing is bold. And I really have to hand it to you and what your team are doing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it. I'm gushing, as you can tell, because I love the work. I love what they do, and I love being able to be a part of it. So please check out the podcast. There's a little something for everyone. You might not be interested in everything that's there, but you're going to find something that tickles your fancy to check out.
I just went there and I was listening to a podcast, and there's a whole list of them, and it's accessible. I just had to click play. Good stuff. And we'll put all the links in the show notes for people to dive in.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
For more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com, on Twitter at blindabilities, and download the free Blind Abilities app from the App Store. That's 2 words, Blind Abilities. And if you want to leave some feedback, give us some suggestions, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. I want to thank you for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.
And the
realities of blind abilities.